everyone. Let me just adjust this a little bit. All right. Hey everyone, welcome to chapter 16 for my book, Perception, the Two Yet One, book 1. I hope everybody is doing well. If you're watching me on YouTube, please subscribe, please share. All of that would be awesome. Those of you who are watching me on Facebook, I can't respond to comments. I'm just going to be reading. All right. So we left off with Sunny and Luna had already met. Also, sorry about the mirroring going on. And just so you know, my the thoughts for my characters are written in italics in the book. I just say he thought or she thought after that. And also, when a perspective changes, I'll say change in perspective, okay? All right, so chapter 16, dinner. 5:02 p.m., Friday, September 2nd, 2011. Ralph wanted to finish talking, so Sonny followed his father and brothers into the living room. First off, I gotta give you this card, said Ralph as he handed Sonny a blue card with the name Braeburn on it, and because of the Scottish name, what Sonny assumed to be a British phone number. There was also a symbol on it, a silver sideways numeral 8, along the circumference of a golden circle with a red apple inside the circle. If you ever need help for anything and your brothers and I ain't around, call this number. Braeburn will help you. He belongs to the people. Sonny looked at the card, then back at his father, and then shoved the card back into his back pocket. Okay, thanks. Armageddon could begin at any moment, said Ralph. And man, am I glad I was able to tell you about this shit before it happens. Armageddon. Wait a sec, thought Sonny. Okay, hold on, said Sonny, trying to get his father to think rationally. Armageddon? How does the Dark, or whatever, plan on bringing on Armageddon? I don't know that, son. Sonny dropped his shoulders and sat back. Of course. Right, he said with blatant sarcasm, too annoyed with his father's obsession with Armageddon to care if he pissed off Ralph with his display of attitude. But you are saying that's their goal. Ralph seemed a bit shocked at Sonny's insolence, but answered him. Their goal is to control the world, and if creating Armageddon is what they need to keep that control, they'll do it. They can control a lot of stuff, Sonny. You mentioned a dog. Sonny sat up, interested. His anger was replaced by curiosity at the mention of the dog. Yeah? And you spoke with old Lloyd. Lloyd knows a lot more than I could ever grasp, admitted Ralph. The mention of Lloyd reignited Sonny's anger. I know, he's the best. So I guess you couldn't grasp how much better our growing up could have been with them around, right? How the fuck could you cut him and Sue out of our lives? I guess you just wanted to beat the fuck out of us without anyone else to tell you different, right? Ralph stared sadly at Sonny for a moment, Sonny's guilt trip seemingly working on him. Sonny's brothers shifted nervously in their seats, but Sonny wasn't going to cower to Ralph anymore. We needed them, Dad. They love us so much. I know, Sonny. I love them too. That's why I couldn't be around them. Memories of Jack, and then when your mama died. Ralph bent over and rubbed his head miserably for a moment, as if attempting to squeeze the memories out. Anyway, the dog. The day your mama died, I found scratch marks on the back door. Huge, deep scratch marks made by, well, back then, I thought it was a wolf. But you said you saw a dog? Sonny's anger faded away because he could barely believe what his father was saying. It sounded like he actually believed him. But then, what his father had actually said sunk in. The dog. The same thing may have happened to his mother. Sonny stared at his father as he thought about it. I don't remember seeing any claw marks on the door, he thought. I had that back door replaced that day, before y'all saw it. Had to. It was ripped to hell, said Ralph, as if reading Sonny's mind. Sonny's heart hurt. Bad. The memory of the new door came back to him. It was the same type of door, but it didn't have any of the scuff marks on it that it had had the day before. Sonny then remembered that Ralph's work buddy had been at the house that day because the guy had left his wallet in the kitchen and then came back for it the next day. Now he knew right down to his bones that what his father suspected was true. A horrible dog, maybe even the same animal, had caught and killed his beloved mother. Mama, he thought. Come on, Sonny, prompted Ralph, obviously anxious to hear about Sonny's experience with the strange dog. Sonny emerged from his stupor, now also anxious to connect the dots and find out what had really happened to his mother. Yeah, a strange black dog. It looked like a Rottweiler without the gold markings. It chased me to the park. It was so fucking huge and fast that I thought... Images of the beast chasing his mother interrupted his thoughts, stealing his energy. I thought it was going to get me, he finished in a whisper. Everyone was silent for a moment. A black dog. In our yard? Asked Wes, surprising Sonny that Wes cared enough to even ask that question. It was actually in the yard? Yeah, I was outside working out with the heavy bag. Did you see how it got in? Asked Wes. I didn't see it come in, but the back gate was open. Wes mouthed the word fuck and put on the face he always wore when he was pissed at himself about something. What? Sonny asked. You're the one who left it open? Wes just shook his head and then seemed lost in thought for a moment before he looked at Sonny. So, Wes said, sarcastically, you're saying it wasn't a normal dog? Sonny was instantly annoyed with Wes's attitude. No, it wasn't a normal goddamn dog. Just because it was fast and big doesn't mean shit. It became transparent and slowly floated up to the fucking tree and... Sonny stopped, practically choking on the words that described what his mother might also have seen in her last moments. He closed his eyes and lowered his head. And what, Sonny? Ralph asked quietly. Sonny let out a sob, one single sob. He looked up, expecting a scolding, or worse, but no one said anything. All their heads were lowered, even Wes's. They were waiting to hear what had happened to him, what had happened to Lucy. Sonny calmed himself, swallowed, and took a breath. It swirled around me, burning me. Every face in the room winced. Then I felt pressure in my head. It hurt, hella bad. I knew it was killing me. Wes covered his eyes with his hand. Curtis was biting his lower lip, tears running down his face. Brad was bent over with his head in his hands, his body racked with silent sobs. And Ralph's face crunched into a heart-rending grimace, his teeth exposed and clenched, large tears dropping down his cheeks. Oh, my poor, sweet, good Lucy, sobbed Ralph. Those goddamn bastards. There was a knock at the front door. Change in perspective. Pardon me. It took a minute, but finally Mr. Fredrickson answered the door. His face was a bit red, and he looked a little sad. But once he saw who it was, his mood seemed to lift a little. Lisa looked up, and then up a little more. "Hi, Mr. Fredrickson. Again?" Luna laughed. She motioned to her mom. "This is my mom." Lisa flashed a polite smile, and she held her hand out. The two adults introduced themselves, Luna's mom insisting on being called Lisa, and Mr. Fredrickson saying he was an old-school country boy, can't help but be respectful. Luna was searching behind Mr. Fredrickson for Sonny. She found him. He was craning his neck from behind the door to see her. Their eyes met. They smiled. Luna noticed that his eyes were a little red and sad-looking. Her smile faded. Lisa nudged Luna with her elbow, snapping her out of it. "Oh, we just came over to tell you that our stove just broke and we don't have a barbecue because Dad sucks at barbecuing and Mom doesn't like to barbecue because of all the smoke," babbled Luna. "Would it be okay if we cooked dinner here?" Lisa sucked in her breath, and Luna realized it was because she had just invited herself and her parents over to the Fredricksons' house, imposing upon them. She was supposed to have just been offering an apology and asking for a rain check. They all looked toward the messy kitchen. Mr. Fredrickson turned back around to face her. "I'm afraid our kitchen ain't fit for ladies to cook in." Luna's shoulders dropped and her face fell. "But we can clean it right quick," said Mr. Fredrickson. Luna looked up at him with her hands tightly clasped in front of her. His eyes twinkled at her, and his mouth was pulled into a small smile. "Y'all just come back over when you're ready." "Okay, thank you," yelled Luna. Mr. Fredrickson's eyebrows rose at the surprising shriek. "Thank you," said Lisa, quietly taking Luna's arm. "I'm so sorry. We apologize profusely for Luna's lapse in manners, don't we, Luna?" "Aw, that's all right, little lady. This ought to be quite an evening," Mr. Fredrickson chuckled. Change in perspective. As soon as Ralph closed the door, Sonny was heading to the kitchen. He didn't feel like talking anymore. There was plenty of time to finish talking with his family later on. Right now, he'd clean the whole damn place by himself if it meant Luna could come over. "Now hold on, Sonny," Ralph laughed. "You ain't gonna get all the credit." That got a smile out of Sonny, and it looked like neither his brothers nor Ralph were sad anymore either. He marveled at how Luna had affected him and his family. Women, they're like magic. They bring so much good with them. They really are everything wonderful in this world, just like Wes said, he thought. Change in perspective. "Mr. Martin, Mrs. Martin, Miss Luna," said Mr. Fredrickson, opening the door upon their knock. "Please come on inside." The Martins each had several bags of food hanging from their arms, and the Fredrickson men, sans Sonny, quickly stepped forward to take them. As her parents entered the house and chatted with Mr. Fredrickson, Wes took Luna's bags from her with a small smile and a polite nod. But he was still staring at her in that predatory way. God, what's his problem? I like Sonny, she thought. Suddenly, she felt panic begin to build inside her. It was the same as when she'd met Wes. She lowered her head and closed her eyes for a moment to try to stop it. It stopped. When she opened her eyes, Sonny was standing behind Wes, and he didn't look happy. He stepped up closer until Wes noticed him, and then gave Wes an icy stare. Wes narrowed his eyes briefly at Sonny before he took the bags of food into the kitchen, leaving Sonny and Luna in the living room. Luna watched Wes go and then looked back at Sonny. His face wasn't angry anymore. In fact, he looked really happy to see her. She was impressed about the way he was standing up to his giant brother to keep him away from her, but couldn't think about that too much because it made her giddy. "I see you brought him. I'm sorry I forgot him," he said quietly. What? Luna was confused until she followed Sunny's gaze. Oh, right. She was holding her teddy bear. She lifted the bear and held it out to Sunny. Sunny took the bear, gazed at it, looked back at her, and then gave the bear a cuddle, filling Luna with so much joy that it was really hard for her not to squeal, clap, and bunny hop. But she managed not to. Stay calm, cool, Luna, be cool, she thought. He turned toward the hall and held his hand out to her. Come on, I want to show you something. She took his hand. It felt so good, so strong and warm. I'm holding his hand, oh my God, she thought. He led her into what she realized was his bedroom. He set the bear down on his pillow and then went to his closet. With eyes wide with curiosity, she walked around his room looking at everything. The room smelled like him, like man smell, and his fresh-smelling cologne. His room confirmed that he was a metalhead. Posters of metal bands hung all over his walls, but those were interspersed with posters of superheroes, dragons, and wizards, and a framed poster of two Egyptian gods, Isis and Osiris. She knew who they were because she had researched the ancient Egyptian pantheon this summer after falling in love with the 1963 epic movie Cleopatra. Interesting, she thought. Posters of naked women hung there too, embarrassing her and making her blush. She looked away from those. Exercise and fighting gear were scattered in various areas of the room. He's into martial arts too? Yay, she thought. A bookshelf held all kinds of books. He had lots of science fiction novels, history, automotive and comic books, and a couple books on ghosts, vampires, and other supernatural phenomena, and the rest of the tomes were on science and math. A drawing of Albert Einstein hung on the wall to the right of the bookshelf. A poster of the periodic table of elements hung on the left side of the bookshelf. He's smart and likes to read, she thought. She turned toward his bed. At the foot of the bed stood two guitars, one acoustic and one electric, by a small amplifier. He plays guitar? Cool, she thought. Seemingly very out of place, a pair of dusty cowboy boots sat on the floor, and a straw cowboy hat sat on the bed above the boots. He must work with the horses at the Cal Expo racetrack or something, she thought. An old photo of a beautiful woman stood on the nightstand next to his unmade bed. She realized who it was. That's Sunny's mom. He has her eyes right down to the color. Oh, poor Sunny, she thought. She felt him next to her. She turned to him and forced a smile. He smiled back and held out his red Power Ranger to her. Told you I still have him. Luna now smiled genuinely and fished something out of her back pocket. Her pink Power Ranger. I think I'm going to carry her around with me from now on for good luck, she told him. His eyes twinkled. Then I'll carry mine too, for good luck. They smiled at each other. Luna suddenly felt a bit lightheaded and slowly lowered herself down to sit on his bed. God, he's so sweet and hot, she thought. Luna, said a stern voice in the doorway, startling her. Come on, Luna. Aren't you going to cook dinner for us all? Jim gave Sunny the hairy eyeball. Change in perspective. Well, hello, Luna, said Mrs. Martin sarcastically when Luna entered the kitchen. Here to help me make dinner for all our new friends? Sorry, Mom. I'll take over now. Luna's tone was a little bratty, amusing Sunny. Luna's mom clasped her hands in front of her in fake wistfulness. Oh, thank heaven. Luna narrowed her eyes at her mother and stuck her tongue out. Sunny couldn't help but guffaw. All three laughed. All right, I'm going to go hang with your dad and the rest of Sunny's family in the living room, said Luna's mom. Jim, she called out, you want a beer? Yeah, called out Mr. Martin. You want a beer, Ralph? Sunny's stomach turned. He glanced around. All three of his brothers were in the living room, eyeing their father nervously. Ralph was quiet for a moment, but then shook his head. "No, but thank y'all." Sonny couldn't believe his ears. He thought his eyes were going to bug out of his head. But then he remembered how Ralph hadn't been drunk while he was in the hospital or on 9/11. Ralph didn't drink when he thought it was important that he didn't. So Dad must think being sober in front of Luna and her family is important. That's fucking awesome, thought Sonny. Luna's mom popped 2 beers open and went into the living room to sit next to her husband on the couch, leaving Sonny and Luna alone in the kitchen. Luna began seasoning the steaks. "Need any help?" he asked. "Nope, I'm good," she said in a sing-song. Despite the warm moment, Sonny's heart hurt for a moment. Seeing Luna with her mom brought so many memories back for him, and in this moment, with a girl at his house for dinner, a girl he really liked, he missed his mom tremendously. "Your mom's great." "You think so?" "Yeah," he said quietly. Luna stopped what she was doing and looked up at him. "Your mom. Your dad said she passed away a long time ago." She was looking at him, yet she seemed to be somewhere else, somewhere painful, a lot like Ralph was when he was thinking about the war. Instinctively, after years of watching Curtis calm his dad, Sonny gently touched Luna's shoulder. "Hey," he said softly. "You okay?" "Oh, I, she began, but caught a sob. Whoa. Come on, let's sit down." He put his arm around her and tenderly guided her to sit at the table. He sat down in the chair next to hers and turned it to face her, keeping just the tips of his fingers light on her knee. "Luna, what's wrong? What just happened there?" Luna glanced at her mother in the living room. Her mother wasn't watching. No one else was either. Sonny handed her a napkin and Luna wiped her nose with it. He handed her another one and she wiped her eyes with it, carefully, to make sure her eyeliner still looked okay. I feel things," she explained without looking at him, "really deeply, and I had a repeating nightmare a long time ago that my mom had passed away, and you looked so sad when we talked about your mom that I could understand maybe and feel it too. I don't know." She shook her head as if disappointed in herself, and then stared at her hands as if defeated. Did she cry because he looked sad? Did she feel these things for everyone or just him? "I would never want you to feel pain because of me," he murmured. She looked up at him, her beautiful green eyes watery. Then suddenly, she smiled. Seeing her smile through her tears made him choke up. All the smiling faces in her bedroom flashed through his mind. He cleared his throat. Whatever it was that had made her sad, he didn't like it. "Come on," she said cheerfully as she stood up. "Let's get cooking. I guess I better wash my hands again." Still affected by her sad episode, he stood up slowly, processing what had just happened as she washed her hands and then got back to the steaks. This has got to be PTSD, like Dad. But what happened to her, he thought. Change in perspective. The steaks frying in the 4 pans on the stove are almost done. Luna glanced at the steaks that were already cooked and on the platter waiting to be served and touched them. They were cold. "Oh, crap. Ooh, I know, the microwave," she thought. "Dinner's almost done," she called out, glancing at Sonny, who was setting the table. He smiled. All the Frederickson men were smiling now. Everyone sat down to the wonderful-looking spread Luna had put on the table. There was so much food that she had to put some of it on the credenza that stood along the wall that separated the kitchen from the living room. The microwave beeped, and Luna took the steaks out. They were hot, really hot. They sizzled for a long time. "Let's dig in," she said. "Actually," Mr. Fredrickson began, "I'd like to say grace, if that's all right with y'all." "Oh, of course," she replied, a little embarrassed that she hadn't thought of that. She and her family always said grace before dinner, but she had assumed that Sonny and his family wouldn't. What made me think that, she thought. Everyone bowed their heads. "Lord," began Mr. Fredrickson, "we thank you for this wonderful day of life, for our new friends, for our families, for our love, for our health, for the food on this table, for Miss Luna's efforts in feeding us all, for all good things you ever gave us and everything you will ever give us in the future. We thank you with all our hearts. Amen." "Amen," echoed everyone at the table. That was such a nice prayer, Luna thought. "Okay," Luna laughed. "Digging for real." Change in perspective. Sonny wanted to eat everything on his plate so that Luna felt complimented, but he couldn't get through his first mouthful of steak. It tasted okay, but he had been chewing for 3 or 4 minutes and the steak just wasn't breaking down. Glancing around the table, he noticed that everyone else had only taken 1 bite of the steak since the beginning of dinner, and they were all chewing in earnest too. Luna looked up at him with worried eyes and a huge wad of steak in her mouth. Chewing almost furiously, she finally gulped it down and addressed all those at the table. "Does it taste okay?" Brad looked up and tried to speak, but his wad of steak flew out of his mouth and landed on the kitchen floor, the place nobody had cleaned. Brad picked it up and put it back in his mouth. "Darn tasty steak, Miss Luna," said Brad with a smile. Curtis chuckled, but Luna was just staring at Brad in horror, so Sonny spoke up. "I've never tasted steak this good before." He lied. Luna clasped her hands and smiled so big that it almost blinded Sonny. "Thank you, Sonny." God, I love her smile, he thought. Mr. and Mrs. Martin looked at each other and then at Ralph, who gave them a sideways grin. A wistful smile was in Mrs. Martin's eyes, but Mr. Martin still looked annoyed. "So," said Mrs. Martin, seemingly a little nervously, "Luna tells us that she and Sonny played together at the beach in San Francisco back in '97, when they were 3. Ralph stopped chewing. His eyes widened. "What's the matter with that? I know it's a weird coincidence, but damn," thought Sonny. Sonny was about to ask his dad what was wrong when Wes stood up. "Excuse me. I just remembered something." He looked at Luna. "The steak was delicious. Thank you. I apologize for leaving like this, but I have something important to do that I just remembered." He looked at Mr. and Mrs. Martin. "Very nice to meet you all." "Wes," said Ralph, as if stunned that Wes was leaving. Wes grabbed his keys and then stalked out of the house. He let the front door slam behind him. Wes is a perfectionist," explained Ralph. "Can't stand it when he's forgotten something." No one said anything. A moment of silence passed before Sonny tried to continue the conversation about the beach. "So Luna and I played Power Rangers at the beach, and..." Suddenly they all heard some sort of ruckus outside. Then the front door was thrown open and Wes ran inside. He again slammed the door, but this time he locked them all inside. He was sweating, his hair and clothes were mussed, and he had a few red marks on his face and arms. "Fucking SWAT team just tried to grab me and stuff me into a fucking unmarked van for no fucking reason," Wes yelled, outraged. "There's sheriffs and police outside too, but I didn't recognize any of them. I swear to God I didn't do shit, Dad." "Oh shit, Wes," said Ralph under his breath. A strange look trickled onto Wes's face. Was it fear? "What the fuck's going on?" demanded Sonny. Alarmed, everyone stood up from the table. "Who do you think it is, Ralph? Who's out there?" asked Mr. Martin, strangely calm. Mrs. Martin put her arms around Luna. Bad people, Jim, replied Ralph. People who operate above the law. Is it? Sonny began to ask. Yeah, replied Wes, his eyes bigger than Sonny had ever seen them. I think it actually is. Oh, shit, breathed Sonny. His stomach turned and kept hurting. His heart rate took off. They're here. The dark. They're here for me, he thought. Who are they? Why are they here? What's going on? Demanded Mr. Martin. Ralph opened his mouth as if to answer, but suddenly there was a loud knock on the front door. Police! Open up! Ralph cautiously stepped over to the window and peeked through the curtains. He looked back at Luna and Mr. and Mrs. Martin very seriously. That ain't no police, he grumbled. Our local sheriff, Sheriff McDaniel, would definitely be with him, and I don't see him or his car out there. Mrs. Martin looked at her husband in panic. Jim, we don't have our guns, she whispered, holding a terrified Luna. Luna's expression of fear made Sonny want to pry her out of her mother's arms to hold her himself. We'll have to do our best, said Mr. Martin to Mrs. Martin. He looked at Ralph. I'm FBI, retired, and Lisa's trained to shoot. What the hell? Who's after the Martins? Thought Sonny. We got guns, murmured Ralph. Get 'em, Wes. Oh my God, squeaked Luna, covering her mouth with her hands. Police, open up. Get down, yelled Wes, just as the front door was hit very hard, as if with a battering ram. Everyone hit the floor. You ain't no police, yelled Ralph as he jumped up. He and Curtis pushed the sofa in front of the door, wedging it against the wall to hold the door closed. The front door was hit again, this time a lot harder. Boom! Brad peeked out of the kitchen window. They're in the backyard, too, he announced in a loud whisper. They're all in black, and they all got guns. Change in perspective. Luna, whispered Lisa quickly, if we get separated, do what you have to do to stay alive, sweetheart. Do you understand me? Luna was thinking about the Gold Dragon guys and knew her mom was too. But separated from her parents? Every single hair on her body stood up. All she could do was nod at her mother. Tears welled in Lisa's eyes. We love you. Lisa wrinkled her nose to keep from crying. Mom, mouthed Luna, almost losing it. Change in perspective. Sonny, you hear me, boy? Yeah, Dad. I want you to carry out Plan C by yourself. You're on your own, understand? Plan C. I understand, Dad. Ralph nodded sharply at Wes. Responding to the unspoken command, Wes heaved mightily with a grunt and pushed the credenza away from the wall with his shoulder, dishes of food crashing to the floor, exposing a trap door with a metal handle in the floor, something Sonny hadn't known was there. What? He thought. The front window shattered. A tear gas grenade had been thrown inside. Everyone heard gunshots. Mrs. Martin cried out and fell to her knees and then curled up on the floor. Mom! Mr. Martin threw himself onto Mrs. Martin. More gunshots rang out. Get out of here, Sonny! Yelled Ralph. Luna! Run! Yelled Mr. Martin. Okay, well, that's chapter 16. And I won't be back next week. It's Christmas week. So Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays. If I don't read another chapter or until after New Year's, Happy New Year too. Thanks so much.